stepping on in, step, step, stepping on in, step, step, stepping on in, step, step, stepping on in, step, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yes, good, good. I'd like to welcome our audience to another segment of Recovery Live Global. This Recovery Live Global birthed out of the pandemic, and you know I've been a person in recovery and trying to keep the word out. Our program is designed for inspirational, educational, and informational. We're trying to keep the word out here that people can grasp the concepts of recovery. And then I've been bringing on special guests that could talk about recovery from so many different mediums. Today I have a special guest, Mr. Edward Sanders, who I met on my path as I was working a little bit close with Mr. Walter Epps, who's running for Wayne County Sheriff. And I met this gentleman, and I began to hear his story, his testimony, and what he had to say. And I thought it'd be some excellent information to inspire the community, and not only inspire them, but educate them and give them information that they should be able to grasp, and then kind of move forward. When I met him, and I was listening, he shared a lot, and so today I would like for him to share with our viewing audience some of that he shared with me about his background, where he is currently, and where he want to go in the future. Mr. Edwards.
Yes, and thank you very much. My name is Edward Sanders. I go by the name of Barakah. I am a gentleman that served 43 years in Michigan prison, 43 years, or in excess of 43 years. I went to prison at the age of 17. I returned home just before my 60th birthday. I was 17 years old in 1975, practically 60 years old in 2017 when I came home in July of 2017. Since I've been home, I have acquired a master's degree from the University of Michigan School of Social Work. I have acquired my license as a social worker. I have been active in the community in terms of grassroots activism. I am a member of the Detroit Justice Center Board of Directors, which is an abolition organization, a movement law firm that takes up issues relevant to taking and trying to move the African American community and Detroit citizens forward. And I'm very pleased to be in that space with all of the talented men and women that work there in that space. I have worked with grassroots organizations here in Michigan, Michigan Liberation Organization, American Friends Service Committee, which is a organization in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and many other organizations, many youth organizations, etc. I'm actually members of organizations that are national organizations that are advocating in regards of this mass incarceration that we are experiencing in this country, the concerns around the criminal justice system, etc.
Well, I thank you for being a part of our Recovery Live Global movement. It's a beautiful thing to just come before the globe and come on the air and just talk to the community about issues and concerns that they may not have. And sometimes they may not meet me in a room or meet me face to face, but this is a platform that information can go out to inspire people. There's a lot of individuals that feel like they have been wrongly incarcerated for things that maybe they didn't even do. And I'm noticing now because of forensic evidence-based testing, and now that a lot of individuals through forensics, there are evidence-based that they wasn't even there at the time of the crime. But it was a time that we didn't have this type of testing and movement and situations available. So as we move forward generationally, there's more avenues on science and evidence and forensics and all type blood and hair and I mean I'm a cosmetologist and hair means a whole lot to me. And I tell you something, the hair tell the story. You know what I'm saying? They could take, a matter of fact, the urinalysis and the hair tell a bigger, better story of the history of an individual's and their whereabouts than the urine samples. And so they're using hair now. You give them a piece of your hair, and you could tell. I mean, they could tell what you ate. They could tell where you been if they find it around. I mean, it's a lot of things that they can tell. I mean, they can tell if you had a drink, if your hair is long enough, and you know the hair grow a half inch a month normally. So that means if the hair growing a half an inch a month, if you got 6 inches of hair, that means that they can dictate and tell what you ate, what you done, how you drank for the whole year.
So it's similar to how we take and look at trees, and we can tell a lot about a tree in regards of its rings and so forth. And that's unique. And this science is now answering questions for us about the certainty or the uncertainty of peoples that are incarcerated. In fact, I'm free today as a result. Well, I give all praise to Allah, but I'm free today as a result of neuroscience, where attorney Bryant Stevenson and his law team took and made use of a cross-discipline, and that cross-discipline is neuroscience. Prior to the use of that neuroscience that they took into court as exhibits to further argue their legal case, they rebuked the idea of pseudoscience that was being used and argued that children, because they mimic behavior that is the same behavior of adult, that they themselves are mature enough to take and be treated as an adults, and that they are stuck in that, they are stationed in that development where they are when they commit that act. And that gave the impression that children could never be reformed, could never be rehabilitated. And neuroscience showed just the opposite. It took and demonstrated that children are, in fact, more vulnerable. They are vulnerable to to peer pressure. They are vulnerable to the environments in which they live in, and they tend to take risks in their adolescent years. But as they mature, they are actually more capable of reform than any other part of our population. And with this evidence being presented to the United States Supreme Court, the court came up with the conclusion that the children are actually innocent of the mandatory and the harshness of the sentences that they were serving in most instances. So they demanded of the states to take and go back and take a second look at these children, even though the court made a ruling for the adolescents that were under 18 years old. The science was much broader than that. The science included adolescents, not just early or middle adolescents, but even late adolescents, and that means people who are in their mid-20s. And we have yet to see Michigan take up the responsibility and reform its laws to reflect this science. And I have been very active in taking and advocating to take and try to help re-educate so that we can take and right-size our law. And I join many others, individuals and organizations. I'm not alone in this. We are even joined with the survivors' family members, or the victims' family members and their loved ones. They are included in this group, in this voice that is taken in action. Many times the prosecutors like to take and just speak about the victims as though they are one dimensional, but there is a pluralistic voice there. There's no monotheistic voice within the group of people who have been victimized no more than there is among those who are victimizing.
Yeah, because when you think about it, everybody that had a relationship with the what language victim of situation. In other words, when my son go to prison, I go to prison.
Exactly.
And when my mother go to prison, I go to prison.
Exactly.
Why? Because I have a relational attachment to this family member of mine. And just like they're doing time, I'm doing time too, because I'm at home wondering and thinking and trying to engage different methods of keeping the relationship going. And because of the barriers that's out there, number one, I got to drive to Ionia. Number two, I got to drive to Marquette. I got to drive to, and number three, the method of sending them a token or a coin or some kind of finances that could help them through their system is barriers there. It's so many barriers for me to stay linked to my family member that's incarcerated to create a barrier. And then the incarcerated person, develop emotions and feelings to think that maybe nobody cares about me.
See, what you just did in describing that, you did what Dr. King was taking and trying to encourage us about not being silenced. Dr. King pointed out to us that, it's the silent majority that is allowing the harm that we have in our communities. And many times the family of people who are victimizing others are silent when in fact they are victimized just as much as any other victim, because they are attached to that family member. And if you don't share the hurt and the harm that has been caused you by the behavior, even your loved one, if you remain silent and don't make mention how you are harmed as the father, as a wife, as a mother, as a sibling, then we don't see the picture. We allow those who want to take and make this into a simplistic solution where they make us believe that it's us and them.
Okay.
We are all still in this.
Yes.
We're all
yes.
still in this.
Yes, something that you would mention, Dr. Martin Luther King. I was listening to him last night.
Great.
I named my son Martin. I named my son Martin after Dr. Martin Luther King as a young man. And you said a mouthful there, because it's a community problem. It's a clinical problem. It's a clergy problem. All of these dynamics, and we can't keep separating clinical from clergy and clergy from clinical and clergy from the community. We got to come to the table.
And let me share with you, this is very personal, and this is very personal. When I was in prison and much younger, people would call me Malcolm. Okay. People used to call me Little Malcolm after Malcolm X. And they didn't know it. They didn't know it that the victim in my case had died on February the 21st of 1975. And they didn't know that every time they referred to me as Little Malcolm, as I had took and progressed it in prison, I began to read and study and so forth. And Malcolm was one of the early people that I began to take and study. And when these individuals was calling me Little Malcolm because of my resemblance, light skin, sandy brown hair, this little gold teeth and so forth when I was a much younger kid, and they kept saying Little Malcolm, they didn't know that when they said that, it made me remember the victim in this case who died untimely and young and black in the city of Detroit in 1975, February the 21st in 1975. Malcolm was killed or martyred in 65, February the 21st. And so every time they said that, they didn't know it was a wound. It was a wound because I related him to Malcolm. I didn't separate him from Malcolm. He had just as much as the right to be to have life and his liberty, and he wasn't doing anything wrong on that particular night, no more than Malcolm was doing anything wrong. And so we are not separate in this. Somehow it's going to come back home. Somehow it's going to come back home. And this is what we find. We took and got behind politicians and demanded, hey, to address the crackdemic with the judicial system, with the penal system. And it has a boomerang. We look around and all of our fathers are gone. All our mothers are gone. All our sons are gone. The community has an absence of black males as a result of a demand that we made. It was a short-sighted solution. That solution didn't work, and it will not work. And we need to correct it and quit talking about it. We need to quit allowing people to take and prosecute us from one political cycle to the next political cycle. We don't need to take and discuss this for another decade. We need to take and address solutions, bring the men and women back into our community, and never again take and try to address social issues with the penal system.
Yeah,
we need to have other tools in that box.
And if you do your stats, punishment have never changed behavior.
No.
You see what I'm saying? Change of a mindset is what changed behavior. If you punish me for doing wrong, then I'm going to be angry and I'm going to do what you say, but I'm not going to be doing it from the inside out. I'm going to be doing it from the outside in. But if you would encourage, they found out that if you would encourage a person for doing right, they'll do more right.
Yes.
And if you punish a person for doing wrong, they'll do more wrong. So even the makeup of the human mind, the makeup of the human body, the makeup of the central nervous system and the brain, and how it relate to one another, and how you can get mental motivation out of an individual to change into some positive motivation out of an individual. It's not punishment.
That's interesting that you say that. Michigan once used to take and follow the social sciences in terms of how it took and did its law, how it took and shaped its law. You know, we was the first state that abolished the death penalty, not just for people homicide cases, but even for homicide cases. We was the first state, the first territory in the Western Hemisphere that abolished the death penalty. We was one of the earlier states that began to take and use good time incentive, that when prisoners took and behaved well, were free of misconduct, that we reward them with good time, you know, which make good sense. And we got away from that. We allowed demagogues to take and come in and divide us and make us believe that somehow giving people incentives only took and encouraged them to do the opposite of what you said, which we know the social sciences tell you no. If you give people, if you encourage them and expect something of them, they would do well.
Yes.
You know, they would do well.
Mm-hmm. And that philosophy have changed my methodology in the way I work, you know, as a clinician, as clergy, it motivates me to think a little bit different. And it take me to a level of, I can work with people today that don't want help. It used to be a line that you can't help a person unless they want it.
Exactly.
But I've learned that you can help a person that don't even want it. And there's a term out here called harm reduction, where you reduce the level of, in other words, you ain't got to stop today. Just gradually cut down today. You see what I'm saying? And now you're reaching
to abate the harm.
To abate the harm. So now you using harm reduction where you causing a person not to just stop, but you calling a person to stop for the day. You see what I'm saying? And I can wrap my arms around just stop for the day. Whatever it is, smoking a cigarette, smoking a blunt, hitting crack, shooting dope, stealing, gambling, eating too much, shopping too much. If I could just stop shopping too much for the day, that's harm reduction. It's a possibility that a month or so down the road, I may have killed that shopaholic attitude.
And I find in my studies what you say to be correct. Like in the case of in Islam, you know, the Prophet Muhammad began, may Allah be pleased with him, he began with taking and prohibiting his community, his growing community during his lifetime from using intoxicants, from drinking. And he started off by only prohibiting it during the time that they were praying.
Amen.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they drunk outside of the prayer, but they were prohibited that when they came to prayer, that they come to prayer in that state. So they were prohibited to do that, and then subsequently, drinking was prohibited altogether. So he
Yes.
started off with this gradual thing.
Yes.
You know?
It's just more user friendly. I mean, if I'm a toxic individual and I'm smoking, you know what I'm saying, all day long, if you can motivate me to stop smoking, like you say, during the prayer or during the Sabbath or during the Sunday or during the Lord's Day,
Exactly.
that will motivate me, because if I get some good results in days like that, it's a possibility that now I could do a Monday.
And we are creatures of habit.
Yes.
And we, just as we can take it, we can recreate new habits as opposed to just trying to take them on suddenly. You can gradually try to take them on.
I'm telling you.
And the expectation part, when I was in prison and I was finishing my undergraduate studies, I can remember I got ready to transfer from a prison in Jackson to take and go to Detroit. And I can remember the night that I got ready to leave, and I stopped over in the school to talk to my professor to inform him that I was transferring. I was auditing a class. I was already done graduated, but I was just taking a class, you know, how you go back to school and just continue to take classes. And that's what I was doing. But in any case, I remember my professor telling me before I went out the door, and this gentleman's name was Mama de Baba. He was from Ethiopia, okay? And he took and told me, he say, don't forget, we expect something of you. Mm-hmm. And I said, yes, I understand. He said, no. He said, I'm not talking about the ordinary. He said, we expect something from you. Mm-hmm. He said, we expect something very exceptional from you. Mm-hmm. And I remember how that hit me, you know, because me and this professor, we would tussle in the classroom and argue about some of everything, you know, and we had our difference, you know. He was a Christian, I was a Muslim. He had his views about certain things. He had his experience as a person from Ethiopia that had been oppressed. And in fact, he served time in prison over in Ethiopia. Okay. He was once a political prisoner, mm-hmm. and he had been tortured by his government and so forth. So we had many different views and so forth. He seen Islam differently than I did because his experience in Africa was different than my experience. I've never been to Africa, but in any case, he impressed me that someone did expect something of me. Wow. That someone did expect something of me that was exceptional. And I have acted with that attitude, not just since then. My grandmother always, impressed that upon me, you mm-hmm. know. And so, and my aunts and uncles, etc. And I'm very appreciative for that. And I think the evidence of that is that, hey, after 43 years in prison, I came home, and within less the time that I or a person would be on parole, I completed a master's degree, you know, at the leading school in the nation of social work. And so that's the evidence of that when you expect something, when you expect something greater.
Mm-hmm. You know. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there was a term I heard that sometimes you got to begin with the end in mind. In other words, your goal have to be in your mind.
Yes.
While you working through the different processes. Can we pause right now and take a break? Just take a station break, and then we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Stepping on in, whoa, 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 whoa.
Well, you might be out there and you want to support the Recovery Live Global efforts, you can do so by purchasing one of our Recovery Live Global t-shirts. So I'm wearing one. If you look at it, it's here. We're moved into merchandise. So you can call us at 313-694-2140. That's 313-694-2140. And just say, hey, I want to support the ministry. I want to support Recovery Live Global by purchasing one of our Recovery Live Global t-shirts. And I had shared with those, if you live in the metropolitan area and you want a t-shirt, I'll deliver it. I'll deliver it myself. There's no cost for deliverance. So call us and purchase your Recovery Live Global t-shirt in support of the Recovery Live Global show. So, support us. It'll be a good thing. Welcome back. This is, phase 2 of Recovery Live Global. And we're back with Mr. Edward Sanders. And he got some more. I know we talked about his history. We talked about what he's doing currently. I'd like to talk about now, Mr. Sanders, what your future look like, or what your hope of the future look like. Where you going? Where you getting ready to carry this? 43 years in prison? That's 2 lifetimes. That's 2 lifetimes that you have spent in the prison. Because they say 20 years is a lifetime. To spend over 40 years, that's almost like spending 2 lifetimes incarcerated. And now that you out in the community and now you tapped into different situations and circumstances, you got your master's degree, you got your clinical degree, you talking about getting a law degree and being able so you could touch and reach and help other individuals that have been impacted or infected by the unrighteous situations with the penal system. So now what tell up? I mean, there's the audience out there. Look at them. And
Having served 43 years isn't something cute. It speaks of our inhumanity against each other. A child and adult can never do the same amount of time because a child has more longevity. And that's what you see when you hear a former juvenile lifer give you these basketball scores in terms of how much time they have served in prison. They telling you about our inhumanity to each other. I served time with individuals who had like 52 years. Could you imagine that? One of the gentlemen, one of the longest serving juvenile lifers here in this state, served as many as 52 years in this state, and he had acquired a few colleagues. He had a few other individuals that have served that number of years or shy by a few months or 1 or 2 years with him, and these guys go all the way back, having been in Michigan prison since the 60s. Imagine a child having been in Michigan prison before Dr. King was assassinated, and they still saying that he or she is a threat to our public, So with that, I'm inspired to take and try to get in law school. I'm scheduled to take my LSAT test next month, and we're at the end of this month. This is the end of March.
March, yeah.
And so we're finna go into April, and I expect within a few weeks I will be taking an LSAT exam to get in law school. Now, I'm more familiar with law than I am the LSAT. I don't know how well I'm gonna do on the LSAT, but it won't reflect my knowledge about law. While in prison, I acted as a jailhouse attorney. Those skills I took and put to use since I've been home. I worked it in the Washington County Prosecutor's Office in their conviction, integrity, and expungement unit. Just as I did while I was incarcerated, I investigated claims of actual innocence. I have also been participating here in the community and helping individuals take and expunge their criminal records and so forth, so that they can take and get gainfully employed, so that they can take and move into a house or an apartment of their own choosing, so that they can take advantage of other government safety net programs that are not available to people when they have criminal convictions on them. So I've been very active and uncharacteristic of how peoples are described that have committed mistakes in the past, particularly uncharacteristic of the propaganda that was made against the children that was convicted and treated as adults while in that state, uncharacteristic of that kind of propaganda.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. There was a slogan and a term that was out that says history never changes, but people do. Let me say that again. History and documentation and evidence from one's history will never change. But I believe today that people do change.
Yes, people
And
change.
because people do change, then people need to be looked upon as an opportunity. Like there's a term out here now called new citizens, is what we call individuals that have been incarcerated and now they back into the community. They need to be treated as a new citizens. They paid their debt to society. And they have, and I know I'm not advocating for the non-encourageable population that just they non-encourageable, but you can't treat everybody as if they non-encourageable and just hold that against them like that.
Absolutely.
Is it any closing remarks that you would want to say to
Yes.
the community as we wrap this session up? Any closing remarks at this time?
Yes, we. You mentioned the new citizen, and I may mention to you before. I am very particular about the use of labels and terms, and even though we don't want to get bogged down on it, but we do want to remain conscientious. Like there's one term, returning citizen, and I may mention to you that no one that has been incarcerated in the United States returned home from prison with their constitutional rights. So to take and label a person as a citizen that has experienced or come in contact with the criminal justice system is misguidance. It takes and cover the reality of that person. The person need to take and be accepted again as a citizen. Okay. I don't have the constitutional right to take and literally protect myself. I don't have the right to take and protect my home. I don't have the right to take and protect my property. Once I have been convicted, those rights are taken. Okay, and so these are big concerns. We do, like you may mention that history don't change. No, we have been prosecuting children as adults for centuries. Remember, Moses, before he was even born, he was wanted. Okay?
Wow, okay.
Yusuf was convicted as a young man and put in prison and served as many as 12 years in prison, not because he was guilty, but because the women of his society, or the higher society, was guilty for taking and lusting after him and wanting him. And so they took and to protect us, themselves from their immorals, they took and imprisoned Joseph. I call him Yusuf, which is his name in the Quran. But we're talking about Joseph that you know in the Bible. So when we talk about innocence is something that it has different levels of culpability. Okay, sometimes a person can participate in one thing, like they refer to the children, juvenile lifers, as child killers, when in fact most of the children were aider and abettors. That means they was not the principal. But your politicians, your prosecutors, and others refer to all of them as killers, as child killers. They are taking and trying to cover their inhumanity to these children by demonizing them. And this goes all the way back to the time that Christ was born. They were looking for a Messiah before Christ was born, and they was looking to take and kill that child then. So this mentality of taking and somehow turning on our own children is history repeating itself. You know, we look at the stories and hear the stories in our congregations, in the mosque, in the synagogue, and the churches, and we don't see ourselves as being that oppressor, but that's where we are today, where we are tolerating this type of inhumanity against each other. But I'm still optimistic about our future. I'm still optimistic and positive about us bringing about a change. I agree with Dr. King. You know, it's gonna come. You know, we may not be present with all of each other in terms of when that come. I may not be present. You know, you may not be present. But I'm optimistic that, you know, we're going to change. We're going to get there. We're going to make better societies for future generations. And so I'm optimistic with that.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you for coming and participating. This has been another segment of Recovery Live Global. Stay tuned. Listen up. We inspirational, educational, and we're going to be providing information, education, and inspiration to help the community go to new levels as it relate to walking this walk in the recovery processes. God bless you. Stay tuned. We have more to come. Gonna have to get you to come back one day, brother.
Absolutely.
And share with us some more. I know there's some more in there.
Absolutely.
And so we'll get you to come back and share some more.
Absolutely.
This has been another segment of Recovery Live Global. Stay tuned.
Stepping on in, step, step.